Let's bring political analyst Khanyi Magubane to weigh in on the DA's Manifesto launch, set to take place this weekend. Khanyi, good afternoon. Thanks for your time on the SABC at this hour.
A very good afternoon to you and your viewers as well.
So, Khanyi, we're obviously playing with an imaginary crystal ball, given that the manifesto is taking place tomorrow. But we can track the party, its relevance in South Africa's democratic dispensation, and also its gains over the years. How would you observe what's transpired over the past few years?
I definitely think that the DA has not had a smooth 5 years from the last general elections. They've had a lot to deal with internally as a party, and I just hope that they are now finally in a place where they can be honest about the fact that whilst the DA does have bold plans, and we've certainly seen the scene that they've set for us coming up tomorrow, I really hope that it's not going to be an event of grandstanding. They're painting Pretoria blue, moving from Church Square all the way up to the union buildings, because we know that politically the march to the union buildings has been one of very, very deep significance, especially when we look at August 9 and the Women's March of 1956. Those women marched for injustices, and they marched for the right not to carry their passbooks. And so if we look at why the DA is doing it tomorrow, I hope that they're going to give us a real reason why they felt that, going to the union buildings and saying to the president, we are right here at your doorstep, that's a thrust, if I can put it that way. That's a jab. That's them communicating subconsciously that we are ready to take over. We are 5-2 moving into office. And that is quite a show of confidence from the DA side. However, I'm not convinced that the DA, will perform like they anticipate to perform, because we know they are part of a coalition, so they themselves know they're not going to get a 2/3 majority. However, I think what the DA wants to concentrate on is bringing back its lost voters. It's bringing back the people that the FF Plus and the IFP and other parties like the ANC themselves took in the last local and general elections.
Well, Khanyi, looking at the DA as an opposition party in South Africa, in South Africa's democracy, the party itself, bar its internal controversies, has also found itself in the middle of controversies, given its policies, both foreign and domestic. What are you observing on that front over the years as well?
The DA has its policy conference where they thresh out their point of views on policy that may potentially go on to be the way we govern. If they do go into the governing seat, then we know that they will be using DA policy as a blueprint of how they're going to run their government and administration. And there's still a lot of problematic parts of the DA policy. The DA likes to talk about poverty and getting South Africans out of poverty. Yet I think that the DA's triple Ps, the pro-poor policies, remain very understated. They remain quite scant in detail in terms of how are you going to do that, especially because we know that the majority of South Africans whose votes they are courting represent those demographics of people who are living under the breadline, and as such their policy leaning should look in that particular direction. However, the DA has always been accused of developing policy that benefits white middle class, as opposed to really benefiting the lower class sector, people living in the LSM 1 to 5. We look at their race policies and how they talk about skin color not being a proxy for disadvantage. That's still highly problematic. We look at their stance on doing away with BEE, of doing away with a lot of transformation laws. So the question is, if it didn't swallow that President Ramaphosa spoke about in his State of the Nation, had to vote for the DA, what would her life look like under the Democratic Alliance? And I think that, for me, is what I really want to hear. Over and above, the grandstanding gesture of marching, the bigness of it, I want to hear the key message that they're going to deliver. And I hope it's not going to be hinging just on the failures of the ANC, because that's low-hanging fruit. The failures of the ANC are well documented for all South Africans to see. So I want to hear what John Steenhuisen is coming with tomorrow.
Right, so the question is, can the DA then remake itself to align with a black majority in South Africa? Looking at the governing presence, their footprint across the country, how they fared in metros, but also on the issue of race and a number of the top members leaving the party. What are you observing on that front?
The DA has a tendency of courting black voters during elections and quickly forgetting them afterwards, which really is no different from what the ANC does. But we know that the DA sometimes even goes as far as having referendums around land reformation, which they expect their black constituents to rubber stamp, and that becomes problematic because we know issues of land and issues of land restitution are very close to a lot of black people's hearts. And so I think that they have a lot to sort out in terms of being clear of the identity that they have and being clear on who they stand for, because currently we always see the same pattern of them courting the black vote. We saw it when they brought Mmusi Maimane, and Mmusi Maimane had that big manifesto launch at Dobsonville Stadium, and he brought in the masses and he brought in the votes. And this time around, they're going to the union buildings. So in terms of aesthetics, they're doing the right things. But what is the DA going to be doing a year, 2 or 3 for the black voters that they're courting today? Will those black voters still feel represented by the DA in 3 years' time?
Khanyi, the Moonshot Pact and how the dynamics will also play out, particularly if they do make a significant gain. I mean, how's the DA going to fare on that front? And also, just the latest cadre deployment records that need to be handed over, the role of the DA as an opposition in South Africa, holding the ruling party to account. How would you score them on that front?
True. You know, the DA for the longest time has held that official label of being the official opposition party. And we know that's a position that the EFF has gone for very strongly, to have that recognition of being the opposition party. And in terms of holding the government to account, we know that the DA has been relentless, of course, over the years, especially in Parliament, in many of their debates and in many of their parliamentary processes, to have investigations opened, to call the president to account. So I think on that front, in terms of their performance as an opposition party, I think that they've been robust, and I think that they've given the running party, the ruling party and government as a whole, a run for their money. And I think that perhaps that has been part of their weakness. They've been so focused on the government and the ANC's weaknesses and calling them to account, that they've failed internally to strengthen themselves as far as their leadership is concerned, in terms of bringing black voters into confidence when the black voters are asking, but last time we had Maimane, we had Mashabane, we had all these leaders amongst you. Why aren't those leaders there anymore? Why the black exodus of leaders? Am I voting for you tomorrow only to have all the black leaders whose faces I see now no longer existing in 2 to 3 years' time, when you now have the vote and you now have the power? I think those are very critical things that the DA needs to look at.
Well, Khanyi, we obviously are waiting for those ideas and the messaging to come across. That's all set to take place tomorrow. We'll leave that conversation there for now, ahead of the DA's manifesto launch taking place at Union Buildings. Khanyi Magubane, political analyst, weighing in on that.